Axelrod. I'm a teacher here, so I'll be giving more of like the teacher side of today's session, while Mr. Soy gives more of the counselor side.
All right, let's talk about winning college applications. So these are the things we're going to talk about. Introductions, we just did those. All right, we're going to talk about how colleges read applications. We're going to talk about how the others will read you. We're also going to talk about the things that are directly in your control, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end, all right? So, there are a few ways that colleges read you. Most of them do it holistically. What that means is they take the next few things they're going to talk about and put them together, all right? So, quantitative. This is when they take the raw numbers and look at the facts. Pure, like they can just read it and know exactly what that means. So these are things like your grades, what kind of classes you took, are they IB, AP, dual enrollment, honors, standard. They will look at your GPA, and something that a lot of people worry about. Let me ask real quick, how many of you know somebody with a GPA over 4.0? All right, when you apply to college, colleges will unweight that GPA and it will no longer be over 4.0. All right. The reason they do this is because different counties have different grading, like points and scales. When you fill it out, they might ask you what the GPA scale you're graded on, and some of them go up to 10 points, which is crazy because a 10-point GPA looks way different than a 4.5 GPA, right? They will also look at SAT or ACT scores if you submit, and we strongly recommend that even if every single school you're applying to is test optional, many of them will be test optional, you still sign up to take an SAT or an ACT, because if you are within the threshold of their like average candidate, or if you exceed that, then it only helps you to send in that score. But if it's test optional and you don't meet it, then you don't have to send it, right?
Okay, so most of today then is going to focus on the things that are still in our control, and those are the qualitative factors. So when they look at your entire application, they'll be thinking about those numbers we were just talking about. And like it says at the bottom of the screen, if your numbers are not in the general ballpark, you're probably not going to get admitted, right? Like if you're applying to a school where the average weighted GPA is like a 4.3 and you have like a 3.2, unless you have some really unique circumstance, you are probably not going to be accepted, right? So we're talking about your target schools here. So when you're thinking about where are you going to have a good chance of getting accepted and what can you still control, we're talking about your essays, which is like the most important thing you can control, recommendations, which we'll get to soon, and then activities and awards or honors. That's the final section of the application we'll go over. All right, so my background is as an English teacher, and so I talk a lot about storytelling and good writing, and this is your opportunity to captivate your audience with a good story. Okay, there's a really cool book out there called Sapiens. It's a nonfiction story. It's all about, or nonfiction book. It's all about what makes humans unique. And the thesis of the story is that humans are unique because we're storytellers. Because everything in our society is essentially a story, right? What is money? It's a story we all believe in. What is the United States government? It's a story we all believe in, right? So it's the idea that humans are storytellers, and that's what distinguishes us. So harness that when you write your college applications and write a really good story about yourself. The most important thing that I want you to take away from today is the word theme. So when you put together your entire college application, a clear theme should emerge. And that's going to be the hardest thing about applying to college, is figuring out what is the theme that you want to convey. Because ultimately your application is like a book, and then your essay is like a chapter or a page out of the memoir, out of that book. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on today. All right, so we're going to do some brainstorming. We're going to come around with paper. If you could please grab something to write write with, a pen or a pencil, and we're going to try to get you a jump start on thinking about who you are, what you've done, what you want to do, and also like what's the theme of your application.
There you go. Here you go, Scott.
Then you're probably not a good candidate. So, like this you'll find quite Okay, so I can see that a lot of you have made some good progress. This is your paper to hold on to. We are not collecting it from you. This is, I hope, just something that you can start using to start considering who you are and how that's going to fit into your overall college application process. I've worked with students for a couple of decades now, either as a classroom English teacher, helping the whole class on college applications, or I've worked individually with a lot of students. And I wanted to share with you on the subject of application theme. A few years ago, I had the student who I can think of who did the best application theme I've ever seen. And the end of the story is that she did apply early decision to the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League college, and she did get admitted early. So she was highly successful. She's exceptionally intelligent, but I think the thing that distinguished her, because lots of really smart students apply to Ivy League colleges or competitive universities, but she had a very strong sense of self, and she brought that into her college application, and she had a really clear theme. So essentially her theme is that she is a language lover who envisions her future in diplomacy. So those things kind of like go together naturally, but also when you looked at her transcript, you would have seen several world language classes that she took in high school. So she was very passionate about learning language in and out of school. She did a lot of community volunteering, especially focused on helping people who more recently arrived in America get access to services. And she used her language skills to assist in that. And then finally, she did a really impressive program the summer before senior year. It was a State Department program where she was chosen to go abroad, so she spent her summer before senior year in Morocco. And from that experience, she developed a very memorable Common App essay. So it tied into language, it tied into diplomacy, but mostly it was focused on like a single experience in Morocco that she learned the most from, that affected sort of how she sees the world and how she sees herself and her future. So that was kind of like the ultimate application theme as far as I was concerned. The other thing that she did very effectively, which we'll get into more in a little bit, is she visited and took good notes when she visited each university on her list. So another huge thing is going to the colleges, asking questions, really paying attention, because you don't want to be like some other students I've worked with who, this literally happened. They said on October 25th, I'm going to apply early decision to the University of Chicago. The application was due November 1st. And I said, okay, so why University of Chicago? And they said, I don't know, but I'm thinking that's the right school for me. Their parents, I guess because they could, bought them a plane ticket 2 days later because they'd never been to Chicago, they'd never been to the University of Chicago. So like, don't be that person, like don't not have visited the university you're applying early decision to, right? Like make sure you know what you're getting into. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit more about where we're headed. All right, so we're gonna get into talking about essays now in more detail. So an admissions officer would say that the essays are the most important non-academic part of your application. So we talked about numbers before, transcript, GPA, test scores if you submit them, but the essays are really significant. And they're divided into two categories, the Common App essay, which virtually everyone is going to write, and then the supplemental essays. And so we'll start off with the Common App essay because the Common App essay is really where your application should begin. It's going to be a 650-word personal statement. There are prompts. We'll take a look at a couple of them. But basically, you can write whatever you want for the Common App essay, which is sometimes called the personal statement. When we talk about theme, just like that student did very cleverly, where she used a summer experience to convey her application theme in her Common App essay, you should try to do something similar, right? So if you're going to write about working in a restaurant, just make sure that that ties into something critical about who you are and a story that you want to convey to your admissions officers.
And something I want to add, who here is on Twitter? Who has one? Anyone? Okay, well, there's this essay that's going around of somebody with great specs on everything, like over 1,500 SAT, 4.0 GPA, everything, and then he posted his essay for everyone to see, like, I got rejected from these schools. In his essay, he talked about like a startup that he did and how, and he did not talk about needing to oh, I do things differently than everyone else. And this came across very full of hubris, right? So be very intentional, because on most cases, he probably would be accepted if his essay was different, but his essay was the thing that probably held him back being accepted to those very good schools, all right? Here are some of the Common App essay prompts, all right? There are 7 that they use, and they're pretty similar every year. The first one is about something that's so meaningful to you, you feel like your application would be absent without it. So again, what this means is if it's visible on your transcript, then don't put it on there. We probably don't want to read it as an IB diploma candidate about how hard the IB diploma was, because we know the IB diploma is hard. It's really, really difficult, all right? But we already know that. And then, what was the second one?
Yeah, so my advice is just to write essay 7. Essay 7, which you don't see here, is basically just write an essay of your own choosing. And the reason I like essay 7 is that you're not bound by the prompt itself. And so you're not being judged on the prompt. So something you could try is you could try writing an essay using one of the first 6 prompts, and then you can kind of go in whatever direction you want to go from there if you feel like you don't have a starting place. Or you can just begin with the story you already know that you want to tell. Okay, the Common App essay prompts are already set for the year. They're not going to change, so you can quickly Google Common App essay prompts and you'll see all 7 of them. You can go past that. Okay, so some things that I want you to realize when you write your Common App essay. So you have 650 words. You don't have to fill all of them. This is not a traditional essay, but the 2 words that I want you to take away for all essay writing would be precise and concise. So precise means you're being very careful with your word choice and your detail and all the things you're using to illustrate your theme. Concise means you have 650 words, but maybe you can write a really good essay in 600 words. That space fills up pretty fast. You do want to write it more like a memoir. It's not going to be a traditional, 5-paragraph essay. Anecdotes, that's the second to last bullet point. That means just short illustrative stories. Your entire essay could be one big anecdote, or it could be several smaller ones that are thematically connected. No matter what you do, you want to have a style that is compelling, because your whole goal is to stand out from the competition, right? You are going to be read by a panel that's looking at potentially 40,000 other applications. They might get down to debating you, right? And if they're debating you, they might say, I really liked that girl who wrote about working in the restaurant. I just thought her message was really compelling. Okay, so just consider the essay is really critical. The stylistic techniques you've been practicing in your English classes that you've seen famous authors use, this is the time you can harness those things in your own writing as well.
And 650 words may sound like a lot, but once you start writing, you may realize that it is not enough. Even so, I encourage you to write as if there's no word limit first and bring it back down. It's really hard to add to a story versus take some stuff away to make it more like specific and to the point that fits in with the theme of your application. Alright, so what are some Common App essay pitfalls? Right? If you are going very flow of consciousness and you're like, you know what, I just want to get this essay done with, and you make it like hopping from point to point in your life, and then like, okay, I'm not really sure why you told me those things. Like, what is the purpose of this? Make sure you give a clear purpose to why you're saying the things that you are saying. Don't paint a negative picture of yourself, all right? Like, don't talk about failing your test and then how you didn't remediate it, all right? That would not be a great essay, all right? You're trying to sell yourself, kind of like a big resume, all right? Be cautious with common topics like death, divorce, and moving. This is not to say that you can't write about it, but if you're gonna write about it, think about how to make it unique, because a lot of other people are probably also going to be writing about this. And if you do write about it, the purpose of it shouldn't be like, pity me, or like, isn't this so sad, right? You wanna give it something that puts you in a positive light and like uplifts your whole application. Don't write about the college you want to attend or your intended major, because if there are supplemental essays on the colleges that you're applying to, then there will be space for that, right? So, supplemental essays, some colleges have absolutely 0 supplemental essays, which means you write the Common App and then you're done. Some of them will have supplemental essays, especially as you get to more selective and more rigorous schools. So Mason, for example, they require 1 supplemental essay if you don't submit an SAT or ACT. Other competitive colleges, some have 2, others have 5. And if you plan on applying to several colleges, you can probably anticipate writing at least a couple. And on their application, a lot of them will say, optional. This is a track, all right? You may think you're getting out of doing some extra work, but other students are also going to be submitting those optional essays. And so how's it gonna look to the person reviewing your application if, like, oh, we asked them to write 750 more words in these supplemental essays and they did not take the time to do that at all, but these other 300 kids did, so maybe we're just not gonna look at this application.
Okay, so the most common supplemental essay question you will get is, why us, right? Like, why are you applying to this university? So that's where the visit comes in. So some of you are gonna go over spring break, take something to write with. Ideally, I wouldn't do it on your phone because then you look like you're not paying attention. So good old pen and paper makes it look like you're with the admissions officers or the tour guides, and you're actively engaged. It'll give you details to include. Also, hopefully you'll ask questions so you can add more that's even more unique to you. I hate having conversations with students when I say, like, why are you applying to the University of Alabama? And they say, I don't know. And it's like, well, I can't invent that for you. So please have a good answer for each school you're applying to. What are the unique aspects of that school that appeal the most to you individually? Think about the academics, right? Like, that's ultimately why you're going to college. So there are things about the community, the activities, those things are great, but start with the academics. Really make sure you understand that. So Virginia Tech, okay, so probably about 40% or more of people from your class are going to apply to Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech is a rare pokey bird that we'll talk about because it is different from pretty much every other Virginia application you'll do. So I want you to recognize they're not going to look at the Common App essay. So the thing we started with, the 650 words, they ignore. If you have letters of recommendation for other schools, Virginia Tech's not going to read them. They are pretty much exclusively judging you on your transcript, if you submit test scores, which are optional, and then 4 120-word mini essays. you should really lean into these essays because these are probably going to determine whether or not you get into Virginia Tech. This is it. This is the whole application. If you don't write down anything from today, the only thing I would recommend if you're going to apply to Virginia Tech, you write down that yellow highlighted stuff right there. The fourth question from Virginia Tech for the last 7 years has been about a future goal. Do not write about how you want to go to the gym more. Your answer should be what you want to major in and why you want to major in it at Virginia Tech. I have seen students get in because their essays, these 4 mini essays, are strong, and their transcript was not as strong. I have been kind of surprised. Virginia Tech is a little confusing in their admissions choices, but I really think that these 4 essays can make or break your application, so take it very seriously. Get people to give you advice on those 4 essays, because if Virginia Tech is your number 1 or even in your top few schools, really devote some time to this part.
All right, letters of recommendation. You are going to get letters of recommendation most likely from 2 places, teachers and counselors. So, the counselor letter. We are trying to summarize 4 years of your life into 1 page. That is really hard, especially if we give the senior input form and you write 1 sentence for everything. All right, when we send you the senior input form, please make sure you fill it out in pretty good detail. I'm not asking for pages and pages of text, but like be pretty specific and deliberate about what you want to be on there. Everything you write on the senior input form is subject to be put on the letter. So if there's something that you absolutely do not want to be put on there, then do not put it on. If there's something that you do want and you want to make sure that we absolutely do include, please feel free to tell us, all right? We want to, like, again, your theme, our recommendation letter, hopefully it matches your theme also. You are not allowed to see what goes on your recommendation letter, all right? This is so the colleges know that we were completely unbiased when writing your letter. I promise none of us are going to try and slander you and make you out to be a terrible, horrible person who commits crimes in your free time. We want to help you reach your goals as well. When describing yourself, please do not write anything that we can obviously tell. Again, bring it back. If you're an Ivy diploma candidate who's in all Ivy classes and you have a 4.4 GPA, you don't need to write that you're studious. I can probably safely assume that you study sometimes, right? Be something that I wouldn't know about you just based off of your transcript. Those are the kind of things that we really want you to emphasize on the senior input form.
Okay, when it comes to teacher recommendations, as an English teacher, I've written a lot of them, and it makes sense. A lot of students ask English teachers because we tend to write well, but if English is not your strong suit, what I would recommend is that you go to one of your other core teachers. Again, you can think about your theme. If you're a STEM person, you might want a science or math teacher, right? If you're humanities, you might want English or social studies. I would not use your band director as recommender number 1. Maybe you get a supplemental recommender, and maybe that's where that person comes in. But start with your core teachers. Highly recommend an 11th grade teacher because they're going to remember you the best. Also, 11th grade is academically your most important year of high school, so that's another reason colleges tend to be looking for those people. Please ask your teacher in person. Try to do it this year before you leave in June 11th. Stop by, talk to that teacher individually, ask in person, because that's another part of just like the etiquette of the college application process. You should, though, send them a follow-up email. And that's just like a reminder. If they're like me, they might use their email as like a checklist, right? So I might say, oh yeah, these are the 5 students so far. I have them on this spreadsheet now, right? Teachers have their own organizational systems. When you send them this follow-up email, I would recommend you include a few other things. It's really helpful if you just give them a little bit of material to work with. It could include maybe your favorite accomplishment related to that class, maybe something that was difficult to you. within that class, especially if you got better at it. Hopefully you did. Also, how has the class had an impact on you, or how can you see it continuing to impact you? There's a lot of ways you could go about this. Now, we cannot write about what we have not seen. So if I'm your English teacher and you're a regional science fair winner, that's cool, but I'm not going to write about the science fair because I didn't work with you on that. But if you entered an essay contest through my class and I read your essay, then absolutely I can talk about that, right? So we're really bound to describe the things that we have personally observed while working with the student.
All right, activities and honors. So this is what the activities section will look like in the Common App. You have space for 10 activities. You do not have to use all 10. In some cases, if you don't have 10 really strong activities, that's probably better to not include those weaker activities. Again, with your theme, if you're applying with a STEM major and you know that's what your essay is going to be about, your first activity should be something that reflects that. Like if you are in poetry club, maybe don't put that at number 1. Maybe if it is important to you, you can include it, but further to the bottom, that's not so related to the overall theme of your application. It should complement your essays, all right? Again, sticking with the theme. And like I said, quality over quantity. If you only have 5, but you can write about them and be very specific within the 150 words they give you, like, oh, I did this for this amount of time, for this many weeks, these are the responsibilities that I had. Those are the kind of things that you should probably put as your activities. Avoid stating the obvious things, like obviously like sports. If you put basketball on there, you're not going to write that you went to practice and you played in games, all right? We can assume that if you're putting on there, then that's what you did. Like I said, quantify. Numbers really help, all right? It's one thing to say that you worked for a summer. It's another thing to say, oh, I worked at a restaurant as a server and I had 4 shifts a week and I was responsible for this, this, and this, and it lasted for 2 months, all right? Again, this is an academic example of what you could put on. And I would say that if you were going to use ChatGPT for anything, I don't like it. But if you needed help paring it down, don't just copy it, but use that as a reference, like, oh, this is the way I can paraphrase it, like this or that, all right, for just bringing it down to the character limit.
In the example at the bottom, I wrote this kind of just based off of my experiences. This newspaper advisor was something I've done before. And so I just thought about what does 150 words about that look like? And 150 characters. This is what 150 characters looks like. So you see that I could incorporate an award and I can incorporate some numbers and some action verbs, right? So I've got led, I've got reorganized, redesigned, created, right? So I'm not trying to just, again, say the obvious things. Finally, this leads into our last topic, which is the honors section. You're going to have space within the part of the Common App called education. It's kind of hard to find, frankly. Within education, there's going to be a space that says honors. These are supposed to be academic honors. So this is where I would put an honor society. I probably would not put it in the activities section. A lot of students are in honor societies. A lot of students don't necessarily do a lot in the honor society. So if you want to include that honor, the honor section is a good place for it, but not necessarily the activities section. Now, there might be some things that don't fit in your activity section. You're over the 150 character count, so maybe those go into the honors. But being on the track championship state level or something, that doesn't fit in academic honors, right? So you would have to fit that into activities. So all of this is just going to be like a puzzle you're piecing together as you, again, try to tell a comprehensive theme that hopefully carries throughout your application. Not everything you say is going to necessarily fit your theme, but you're hopefully going to have something that the admissions officers can take away from your overall application. So we have a couple more minutes. We wanted to just see if you all have any questions for the group.
If you're like a leader in your honor society, does that count as an activity?
That's a good question. So yes, if you have a leadership position in something, it might make sense to put it in activities. Yeah. And that's where it's going to be some of these individual choices, right? Because like if I'm in the honor society, but I just went to like 4 meetings and I didn't do much, it's probably not that impressive. But if I was like the president or the secretary, right, maybe that is something I want to emphasize in my activities section. Any other questions? Got it. Okay, so asking about an elective that's related to a major that's not necessarily a core class. My general advice is still to have a core subject teacher because what they're looking for in the letter is you academically, right? So I would start there, but depending on what universities you're applying to, you might want to also have a supplemental recommender, and that's where the elective would probably come in. Okay, I think we're out of time, but you can come up and see us if you have any individual questions as you make your way to your 3rd session. So thanks a lot, everyone.